Hello everybody, this is Diane. I am here to show you the second of the binder journals that I've been working on. The first one already sold. This one is a recipe binder and it's very old. There's no copyright date on it because it didn't have any printed material inside it except for what was printed on the divider pages. This was a recipe binder that you were supposed to write in your own recipes. They provided notebook paper and dividers and envelopes. So it's about 6.5 inches by not quite 9 inches. Very, very close to 9 inches. The spine, oh, I was going to put something on the spine. The spine is 1.5 inches. I was planning on putting a ribbon through this and gluing it there. So I will do that. I don't know what color ribbon I have to go in there, but I will do that. I did a couple of videos, I think 3 videos actually, working in this. And one of them was decorating the cover because there's lots of spots on the cover. And I covered some of them up. I couldn't cover them all. I wanted the beautiful vintage pattern on the cover to show. I tried cleaning that, of course, and it didn't work. So it's got some feed sack fabric and some vintage trim and a vintage yo-yo. And this is hand crocheted trim there. So it's all vintage. Everything on the cover is vintage, including the cover. And there is a vintage Denison label. Well, it's not actually Denison, but it's a household label, just like Denison, and it had the gummed back, but I glued it. And it does have abbreviations and weights and measures here, if you're interested in accessing that information. There are, I think, 5 sections in here, and each section has the same sort of pages, including a large envelope. And it's full. I had another section in there that I was going to decorate and include, but I took that last section out because it is very full and you haven't even put your things in it yet. Of course, you can remove these recipes and put your own in, but I just love these vintage recipes that are in here. This is the original title page. It says my recipe book had instructions for using the book, write or paste recipes on the ruled sheets, etc. I think you could figure out how to use the book. And I added these reinforcements that I made out of some cardstock and my whale tail punch. And there's just a scrap of cardstock paper there. In this pocket I included a Bisquick recipe, and this actually came out of this box. It's in pretty poor shape, but this recipe was in there. And bean and sausage casserole, handwritten recipe. A handwritten recipe for date loaf candy. And pumpkin bread. Lots of vintage items in this book. These are cut from a cookbook, these images, and this is from a vintage apron pattern from the front of the pattern, and this is another vintage label. I used pages from Graphic 45's Home Sweet Home. I had about 4 or 5 pages left, and I still only use half of each page because I only cut them 5.5 inches. So this is the first one. I love that image. And on the back of this, I glued a couple of recipes. This came from the back of a flour bag. It was in a bunch of recipes that I had gotten at a flea market. Someone had cut it out, and looks like they used it. Got some spots on it. This is from a cookbook, Libby's Hot Waffles, and you can't read all of the recipes, so those aren't usable. But this is a wallpaper border that had the shape cut out, so I put that on as a pocket. Included a scrapbooking, well, these are both from Scrapbooking Papers. Recipe cards you can write on, and you can actually glue recipes to the back there. And a tag that I made, and I did this in a video. This is actually a page from this book, because I couldn't use a lot of the pages that came with the book. Just a scrapbook paper border and an image cut from an old magazine. Put some lace through there. The first section, oh, and I decorated my reinforcements, just stamped on them. So there's red and brown. Red in one section, brown in the next section, etc. And this is the first divider page, and it says breads. I didn't try to match everything in this section with breads. I just used stuff. But this first page does say breads. It has someone's writing up here. So apparently they wrote the names of the recipes that were in the envelope, but the envelopes were empty. I cut this out of a kid's book, actually. This display of food. And just a little space you can write on, and inside the envelope is one of the sheets of paper that came in the binders. You can write on that, and another scrapbook paper recipe card. Each section has the divider page and an envelope, and one of the original pages with a written recipe on it, and a blank original page, and a scrapbook paper, and then we have the next section. So the original recipe here is crunchy muffins. I'm not sure what makes it crunchy. And I put some washi tape on the edge because this edge was crumbling. And, well, I better put some washi tape there too, because I just tore that. And a vintage sticker. So this is not the same as those, but it will blend in well with them. Let's take care of this right here and now. I think that's a problem with having the book too full. Too much pressure on the pages. So you can remove anything you want to remove. I did a little bit of stamping. I didn't do a lot of stamping, but I did some. Here's the scrapbook paper. It's part of the Home Sweet Home. I added this large recipe card and just glued this little image from an old magazine. This is a pocket, and I included a recipe card and this little booklet for Watkins Cocoa, 1928. This was kind of torn up here, so I glued on this printable label. Coupon attached entitles you to expert cookbook free. The coupon section is gone, but there's some recipes in there you could actually use. This is a very old, soft paper. Well, it says 1928. That's pretty old. We're coming up on 100 years for this. And on the back side, we have a triple pocket. These pockets don't go all the way down to the bottom, but they're deep enough to hold what I put in them. In the top, these two are scrapbook paper, and this one is wallpaper, vintage wallpaper. This is a handwritten recipe for apple dumpling supreme, and it was just written on a piece of paper that they had lying around, must be, for the home insurance company. There's a piece of wallpaper that I put in there that you can use to embellish your journal. This is just a card that I had made, and it has a blurb out of a cookbook that says how to use recipes. This is a little booklet, The Secret of Better Chiffon Pies, and it's got some recipes in there. This came out of Knox Gelatin, and it's, I don't see a date except it says, oh, copyright 1946. Yep, that's the copyright for that little booklet. Handwritten banana bread recipe, and Presto Self-Rising Cake Flour has a recipe for gold cake, but it's not complete. But you can write on the back. The next section says cake and pastry, and I just left these dividers alone because they do have information that you could learn from. Stamped a mixer there. This envelope has the back portion of a apron pattern, and this side has a page from an old recipe, this image cut from the children's book, and then this image from Scrapbook Paper, and it's actually a recipe for Grandma's apple pie. And this came from the same paper. These are the Graphic 45. It says happiness is homemade, and there's Grandma's apple pie. And also is a handwritten recipe for beef loaf. I wonder if that's like a meatloaf. Carrot cake. It's got coconut in it. Lots of space for writing on the back. And the person wrote her name and address on here. Another recipe card and a Betty Crocker recipe card. Turkey in stuffing shells. Dark fruit cake is this handwritten recipe. And I just put a vintage label here. I stamped a cheese grater there and added some vintage cellophane that I glued down. Instead of scrapbook paper, well, I guess along with the scrapbook paper, I just added this page in that was from a different binder. The holes lined up perfectly. I just had to trim it a little bit to make it fit. So you get a bonus page in this section. And here's scrapbook paper with aprons on it, and I added this wallpaper border and the piece of hand crocheted trim. A handwritten recipe for pumpkin pie, and it's seen better days, but I liked the pink. There's a lot of pink on this page, and then this is kind of a corally pink page on the background. This is a journaling card that I made on a video, and a recipe card. I put lots of items in each pocket and envelope. On the back of this is I just glued a recipe up here so you can write on that. You can journal on it or write a recipe. And there's a stove that I made with my Cricut, and I glued that on as a little tuck spot and included a really pretty recipe card, double recipe card with pears on it. This is 1986 from Current. And there's another handwritten recipe on a memo paper, the Brown Hotel, Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky. The next section has desserts. And I added another Cricut element here. I made this mixer with my Cricut and tucked in Graphic 45 recipe card and a Betty Crocker recipe card. And this is individual meringues with chocolate rum sauce. And the envelope has this fun image. This is, what is her name? She's on these little booklets. I've seen them in flea markets and antique stores. Aunt Jenny from Spry Shortening. So this is Aunt Jenny. And she says, Calvin, that's her husband's name. Calvin always likes to lick the spoon if he's around when I'm making frosting. Husbands aren't much different from little boys, are they, ladies? And then we have just a printable image of a wedge of cheese with a pretty label. Some apron, scrapbook paper, piece of, from a page of a cookbook with some cellophane that I glued down. Those are vintage pieces. And inside there's a page from a little cake book, cake recipe book. A couple of recipe cards. This is a little page from the Baker's Chocolate little cookbook and a journaling card. The handwritten recipe has apple mallow, velvety orange cake sauce, fluff pudding and fluffy fruit topping to use in sponge cake. Then there's a blank card and I stamped menu at the top of that. Here's the coupon shopping list. That's a little bonus envelope that you get in this section. I had to cut it off a little bit because it was too long, and I just glued that and just added some washi tape to the back. And inside I added 2 list papers that you can write on, front and back. And I put a couple coupons in there. They're from 1993 or 1992. So they're not super old. And here's the scrapbook paper. I glued this image from an old magazine onto cardstock, and it's the new caloric range. It's everything she wants in a range. But it's a little tuck spot, and I just added a couple of recipe cards. And I think these are both double, yeah. Yeah. Is it glued? There we go. So you have lots of journaling space on these cards. There's a wallpaper pocket on this side, wallpaper border. And it features some fruit, and the apples are prominent, so I put this vintage label up there, and this is just a sticker that it's glued to. And some handwritten recipes: vegetable salad with cucumbers, tomatoes, and cantaloupe and string beans. Flavorful chuck roast, home-style beef stew, and this little shopping list, and a recipe card. And this section says eggs and cheese. I just added some elements that I glued down. This one is this one's digital, this one is vintage. And this is the envelope, and this beautiful image is from a vintage cookbook, one of the little brochure type of cookbooks. And there's a recipe page here and an image from a magazine. Inside that pocket is a very old, well, it's pretty brittle, boiled salad dressing. Oh, I have 2 old ones in there. Gold medal date and nut bread. This one is very fragile, coming apart. In fact, that just came off. I am going to just put a little, how about some of my cellophane back here? My old cellophane tape. Fixing things as we go. The problem with using real vintage stuff is sometimes it's pretty fragile. It's not lined up perfectly, but it'll hold it in place. I'm going to put a little piece across the top too. I don't know what it's like in New England today. They were supposed to be hit with a huge bomb cyclone or nor'easter in parts of Pennsylvania, but in my part of Pennsylvania, we're supposed to just get wind, which I hear out there. We have the wind and the cold, and we may get a little snow, but I think we are really, where I am, is really on the outskirts of this storm. But I can hear the wind. I'm going to put another little piece. I'm sorry for taking so long to fix this, but I want to fix it because I don't want to have to get rid of an old handwritten recipe. I don't necessarily want to eat gold medal date and nut bread, but I like the old recipes that are handwritten. They're special. Okay, so we fixed that up pretty good, I think. And there's a Betty Crocker recipe in there for salty cereal snack, probably similar to Chex Mix. Dried beef casserole, and a plain recipe card that you can write something that you really like on there. The handwritten recipe is an omelet, and there's a little stamped colander. And on the blank page, I glued this image from an old magazine. You get a bonus journaling page in this section also. And here's the scrapbook page. It's got a recipe glued up here and a pocket, the crocheted lace. Oh, I already put a piece of that wallpaper in there. Well, now you get two. I saw it laying on the table and I thought, oh, I thought I put that in. And I did, but there's a sunflower recipe card. This came off of a sugar bag. Fresh peach pie. Handwritten recipe, chocolate chip cake. And this little journaling note card that we made on a video. It's got macaroni and cheese on the back and 3 sheets that you can write on. Pretty scrapbook paper. And on the back is a piece of old ledger and these 2 images that came from a little cookbook. They were on the same page. Probably set up similar to what I did, but they weren't so far apart. But she is serving something fancy and he's ready to eat. This section says soups. And I added this, whatever that is, from a vintage cookbook. Here's the envelope, and it has the front part of a pattern, an apron pattern. I love it. Buttons and bows apron. It even has button printed fabric here. It's got buttons on the pockets and bows. And on the back is a piece of the Home Sweet Home paper. No fried donuts. A little booklet for good things to eat. My surprise recipe, Martha Lee Anderson. It's from baking soda. Cow brand and Arm & Hammer. But there's a lot of recipes in there and 2 blank cards. This is a very interactive book. I mean, most junk journals are interactive, but this one is pretty much, everything is tucked into pockets. Bread and butter pickles. Ooh, I didn't put the reinforcements on these 2 pages, so I will do that. And then the last scrapbooking page is this one with a pocket that I made out of an old ledger, which I glued to cardstock. I added a piece of vintage cellophane and an old label. This one's a printable label. And I added a vintage yo-yo. Recipe card. Handwritten recipe. Wacky cake. And this journal card that we made on a video. This is actually a Victorian era ephemera piece. It was cut out of something and it was in a scrapbook. And the recipe here is peach cobbler, but you can't read the whole recipe. And there's journaling on the back. And then I glued this lady that I made from my Cricut and 3 of the little, well, 2 little cards from Graphic 45, and this is a printable. And then here is a final pocket that I put in. I added this, came from another recipe binder. I had to cut it to size and then punch holes in it, but it has this nice pocket here. And I added a page from, I think this was a Hershey cookbook. So it's got jumbo bars, chocolate nut mosaics, and bonbon tea cakes. Old-fashioned oatmeal cookies, and a blank recipe card. And then on the back, I just added this little vintage library pocket and decorated it and put a recipe card in there. I will put my signature on the back of this recipe card. So that's it. Did I say I put this white elastic on it? Because it is puffy already, and if you don't take anything out and start adding your own, it'll just get fatter. If you were gonna add, if it was mine and I was gonna add a lot of my own stuff in here, I would remove stuff because I wouldn't want to stress the spine. It is an old book, so I wouldn't want to stress it too much. So there you go. I hope that you enjoyed seeing this book. If you are interested in purchasing it for yourself or for a gift, I will link my shop below, and you can follow that link to the shop where this is listed when the video goes up. Thank you so much for watching and for following along with me, and I'll be back soon with another video. Have a creative day today. Bye-bye.